So apparently, I can only talk about track templates on this channel. Let's suppose that you are offering a service in your studio and you have to record several tracks in a guitar, vocals, or piano and vocals, like the most simplistic way of just recording a ton of demos in one single session. This is a workflow Reaper video, and we will take advantage of all of the routing and rendering available. If you're in Mexico City and you're looking for a studio to record some demos, just send me a message and I'll happy make a space for you. So a certain composer was going through Mexico City on his way to another city to the beach, and he wanted to record some things because he had some demos on his set, and I ended up with this big session, right? And I know this always seems intimidating for most users because it seems way too unnecessary to have this many tracks, but I will show you why this is extremely useful in the long term. You have a clean session on Reaper and you have someone coming into your studio. I'll just leave my recording toolbar here, and let's suppose that I'm going to record lead vocals, and probably I will end up recording. There are a ton of things that you can do to make this as fast as possible. So I'll just double click once to make the first track. I'll rename it, call it lead vocal. I will hit Command plus T to create a new track, hit Tab on my keyboard, and change the name of the second track to guitar. And the setting that I did this time for the guitar was guitar center, guitar L, and for copying longer names, you can hold Option and Shift and press left on your keypad, and that brings you back. If you have a lot of words that you need to cover, you can just hold Option, Shift, and press up, and it will bring you back. But if you're trying to go forward, you can hold Option, Shift, and pull and press down, and it will select everything after it. So I'm going to select guitar, copy it, create a new track, tab, guitar, the space is already copied, and now I have guitar L, guitar R. Those are my ambiances, my rooms, my center, that's a close mic, and my guitar DI because I want to use that as some sort of effect. Right from the beginning, I'm going to take advantage of pan selected track symmetrically left to right. You can download this one on the RIA pack, and as you can see, it's going to pan my guitars left and right. And I'm also going to create a group for both of them, and this is going to be called guitars, right? That would be the most logical way to build a session. The problem is that if I start doubling those tracks, they are going to belong to the same group. So let's stop right there and let's try to always think one step ahead so we don't have to go back as much. I'm going to arm all of my tracks, and with my recording toolbars, I have the actions to set the arm input to mono 1, and maybe I have my vocals on, 5, my center on 2, and my DI on 1, and my L and R on 3 and 4, right? So I'm going to make all of my inputs just like that without having to go into the menus and do a ton of things that I don't want to. I can unarm all my tracks, and I'm going to group all of them and call this track 1, right? And now they are in a folder and everything's tied up. Everything's tidy, everything's organized. What will probably end up happening is that maybe someone tells you, I just want to record one track. So always be one step ahead of your artist. I suggest that you always have a second lead vocal track. Remember that the track name makes the name of the file as you record it. So naming your tracks is extremely important so you don't have to waste time later on finding those files. Just in case, and this is not something I suggest for like just planning out demos, you might want to have some ad-lib tracks and some background vocals. like pretty much everything set. So whenever you need something, you're not wasting time. I'm going to duplicate, not by duplicating one by one, but I'm going to duplicate the folder so I have all of the structure and all of the routing done. Before I start duplicating all of this, I'm going to create a couple of auxiliary outs, let's call it that, or buses. The concept in the end is the same, like it's just something where I'm routing all of my whatever insert word you might want. So bus, my lead vocals, bus, guitar center, bus, guitar DI, bus, guitar room, right? And just in case, bus ad-libs and bus background vocals. This is going to be super useful when I'm trying to mix down stuff, because I'm going to have several takes, several tracks. You'll get the hang of it. I'm going to go into the mixer for a second. So remember that if you can see the sense in your mixer by checking the theme adjuster options, and on the mixer control panel, you have your show sense, you will be able to see this section right here. So from my lead vocal, by holding Option, I'm going to click and drag all the way into my Voz lead vocals. And what the Option modifier does is it disables this blue icon that you can see right here. That if I click it, is the parent send of this track into the folder, and from the folder into the master. So I don't need this routing to work. I only need to go straight into the box, into the bus of my lead vocal, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the rest of my tracks. And if you just want to copy a send from one track to another, you can just click, hold, drag, and it's going to copy itself into another track, my ad-libs, and my backing vocals. If you're trying to scroll horizontally, you can hold Shift and use your mouse wheel. Or if you're in a trackpad, you can just use several fingers and drag. Now what this is doing is going to let me send all of this here. So I'll probably have some sort of vocal processing on this track. That's for my vocals, something for my DI, something for my room, maybe clean up something with a little bit of high-pass filtering that I don't need from my rooms, and such and such. Like, I'm not going to do a ton of it because it's just demos and I need the lowest latency possible. In case if the artist needs it or I want to be prepared, I will always have a reverb for my lead vocal, and I can just create a send from my Voz lead vocal into my reverb lead vocal, so that way it's always open, and I'll use whatever plugin I want here. That has to be really low impact on the CPU. Right? Now everything is routed. You have to do this step first, because now when we duplicate the group itself, all of the routing will be copied from one to another. So if the artist tells me I want to record 3 tracks, I'm going to be one step ahead and I will open 5 copies of this. Maybe this one doesn't have even a name, and it doesn't matter because that's just a backup for whenever I need another track. And there I have track 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? As you record, you might want to take advantage of right-clicking and insert tempo time signature. And remember to try to get as close to the click as possible. If the artist is not getting as close as possible, like, learn when to let go, because you're more concerned about the take than about an extremely clean click track, because this is not necessarily a final version of it, right? And even if the interpretation is really good, then it doesn't matter if it's not matching perfectly with a click. You can try and edit a little bit, and that should work. Okay, so now you have everything here. And I can see beforehand that you will run into several issues when you're trying to record like this. Remember that in Reaper, when you're using the different recording modes available, either punching or punching selected items, I will leave that link in the description because I have done videos on that already. So despite the many updates that we have had on Reaper regarding the fixed lanes, recording modes, regarding the lanes and the takes, just remember that whenever you're recording something, what will end up happening is that you will have many takes of anything. And the most important thing when you're trying to do a recording for a artist, whoever they are, or you're just in charge of the computer for that session, is you don't want to lose control of what you have where. And whenever you need to export the multitrack, you always want to be able to very clear what you're sending, what take it is, and there are a ton of things to talk about recording here. So maybe you have this many takes and you discarded a couple of them and now you have something like this. And here I'm going to show you more of several options that you can do and choose the one that works best for you, but please never lose control of your session. And remember that the problem amplifies the more tracks you have, and it can get chaotic if you don't pick the one that's cleanest for you and you really understand what's going on. The channel where you're recording, you never want to mess with it. You never want to start handling stuff around it because you will lose track of the takes and you will lose. It's very risky to lose information of takes that were wonderful and maybe the artist wants to recover, and you lost it completely, right? So whenever I'm done using the takes, I have said this couple or many times, is that despite we have comps on Reaper now, one thing that you might want to have is one more track that's called lead vocal comp, because you're physically dragging something from one take into that. And maybe you're switching between takes and you're trying to let them listen and compare stuff without having to punch in stuff, and they can still listen to what happened beforehand. And this can get really complex easily. So one way of solving it is to have one track that's called something like comp, and you can start dragging stuff there as you have all of these takes. That way, whenever you have one take, you can just drag it up top. But see, like, you don't want that to happen because you're going to drag all of them. And the other thing is that you will have to then do a right click and take, and then just keep one of them, or instead of watching all the takes, you would probably want to start messing around with a show all takes when room. And since this isn't a per track option, like sometimes this isn't the best way to do it. So maybe duplicating and just deleting all of the takes that you don't want, by either holding a mouse modifier that you set up on preferences. Like, there are so many ways to get around this. But what I've been doing, and I think is working well enough, is I'm using the comps. So I have a couple of actions set up down here where I'm exploding takes on selected tracks to fix lanes. So whenever I run this action, you will see that I get these different lanes. It doesn't create automatically the comp lane. So you have to create it again by creating comp into new empty lane, right? The other option for this, let me show it on track 2. It's, let's suppose that you have this second track here. I have tried this one as well. I just duplicate the recording, remember the recording track, and I'm not going to mess around with it because all of my takes in the order I recorded them are still there, and I will probably won't lose anything. And on the new track, because I only duplicated a track, I can use explode takes across tracks, and it's going to generate these many tracks where I have all of my takes. And I can see that I have 9 takes here, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 down here, right? And now I can start building like some multi-track comp. In concept, it's pretty much the same thing, but probably there's a bit more room to work in if you group this then into comping, lead vocals, something like that. And now you have a folder, and you can just group all of these tracks with a media, razor, edit, and follows. And now you can start doing pretty much the same thing like that, but you will have to be turning on and off the groups of your tracks so you can start fine-tuning if you want this from here, or maybe this, or maybe this, or maybe this. And I feel it's a bit slower, but in concept, like this is best for exporting all of the takes for your client. When you're exporting all of the takes for your client, this is the way to go. This is the fastest way to go. If you're only trying to not get lost in the session, I really suggest that you keep recording on one single track and then do all of your comping on another track. Again, as I told you, I have a couple of actions where I can just turn the takes into lanes. I will double check that my first comp is most likely the last take that I had selected. And by double clicking, remember that you can go into the comping mode and this small line at the bottom appears and you can start making your comp, and you can start switching from the big lanes or the small lanes, or right click and show only play lane by holding shift and clicking. This also is a nice shortcut to work around. The good thing of having the comp open is that you can switch between takes still. As you can see right here at the bottom, I can see that I'm switching between takes. And this also responds to your T shortcut for switching between takes. So I can make comps super fast like that. When I'm done, I'll do this. I double click the yellow button of the comping lane. I will only leave my recording track muted so I don't mess around with it. And if I need to record something more, I can, if it belongs to the same instrument, I'll just drop it down there. So I told you this was going to be oddly intense. So the same issue will happen, for example, if I have these 4 tracks recording a guitar. What I want to be able to do is to have different groups for the different tracks of guitars in the different songs, right? And that's why I didn't do it at the beginning. So I'll just use the shortest name that I can think of, like guitar T1, track 1. And again, holding Option, Shift, and up, I'll just copy, hit Enter, OK. And I'll load all of my default flags that are media, razor, edit, volume, mute solo, record. I don't want the panning to be tied up, and I'm not going to close this window. I can just jump into my track 2, select my next guitar tracks, go into my next group, rename, paste, write a 2, load default tracks, go into my track 3, change my group, rename, 3, OK, load default tags, go into my track 4, change my group, write 4, load default tags, close, and now all of my guitar tracks are linked when I need to arm and record any of them, and I won't miss any of them. In the case of vocals, you're using only one track, so grouping isn't necessary. And again, the whole idea of when you need to export all of the multi-track, what you should be delivering to your client is the main comp that you decided in the studio after the session of the vocals and the main instrument, a stereo bounce, not completely mixed, and stop trying like to. That's not necessarily a full mix, like it's just a couple of balance here and there, maybe a little bit of processing as you went into the DAW or part of your own sound that you're trying to build for your studio. You don't need some mastering plugins so that you're applying things that your studio sounds super loud And that's what makes you a great engineer. It's recording. Like, leave it at recording level. It's fine. Also, you will probably have to deliver some multitrack of all of the takes. And here's another tricky part. So I'm delivering my guitar takes, and I have different songs, and I have take 1, take 2, blah, 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 blah. I have Morena, blah, 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 blah. I have my guitar comps, and those are the comps that I did, that I selected, right? Of the 5 songs, my vocal comps that I selected of the 5 songs, and the vocal takes, right? All of the takes should last from beginning to end. There's an action in Reaper that can help you out, but it can really mess you up if you don't pay attention. So let's suppose for a moment that you are using recording on different tracks because that's the way you like to do it. And now you're trying to edit everything in the comps, in the lane way of doing it. So let's suppose for a moment that what will probably happen is that you end up overdubbing certain sections of the song, others not as much, and more often than not, the takes will end up looking something like this, right? I can select all of these, and now I can use the action implode items across tracks into takes, and you will see that I have this messed up version of takes that sometimes we end up with. And when you turn those takes into lanes, you will end up with something like this. Maybe, for whatever reason, whenever you're recording into lanes, you have some empty spots like this. And there's also an action that moves the items up, if possible, to minimize lane usage. And this kind of works, but the problem is that you will mess up, or you can mess up, the continuity of the way you record that stuff. So if you want to try that one, use it. I'm not using it because it has messed up my sessions more than once, and especially when I have to go back into exploding the track to export all of the take selection. So be careful with that option. I like the idea of having everything clean up here and not having this extra space, right? Like, I like the idea of it, or even like this, right? This looks cleaner. But then, I'm messing maybe these takes were with this one and with this one, and like it can get super messy. So just keep that in mind. Once you have done all of this, I don't know why my camera is moving so crazy lately. Once you have all of this, our best friend for rendering, again, is your region render matrix. You open your region matrix, and maybe you have track 1, track 2, and track 3, right? Remember that routing-wise, what you have is that if you only render this track, like lead vocal of track 1, and this is your actual comp, let's call it your comp. You want to export the lead vocal of your track 1, your guitar center, DI, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, whenever you come to these stereo tracks, if you're sending them as mono, it's fine, but you can take advantage of these buses that we left down here, right? The issue is that since you have many takes when you're trying to export not the comp, but the takes, you will run into some issues, right? Because doing this will export all of the takes at the same time. So for that, your session has to grow. I'm sorry, but your session has to grow. So for that, your session has to grow even further. So yeah, I'm sorry about it, but it's for having a clean delivery for your client, and they don't have to know all of the things that you're doing to get them their files, right? So whenever a client says, oh, but it's super easy, like they have no idea of all of the micromanagement that we are doing in a single session. So again, I would simply export all of them across tracks, right? And since everything is routed, like I can just call this lead vocal take 1, and remember using your shortcuts on your keyboard to name things a lot faster. I can just name this one lead vocal take 1, and remember to take advantage of the shortcuts that I have taught you many times in this video, and honestly, like, see how fast this is. Like, that took me no time whatsoever. So whenever I go into my region render matrix, what I will end up seeing is I need to export from song 1 all of these takes, but this is only for multi-track delivery and for multi-take delivery. This is not for comping, this is not for mixing. It's just a different way of handling your session. And you can even create a save file that says multi-track export, where you do all of these odd movements that don't benefit at all your comping, your editing, or your bounces for the client. There are a ton of micro steps that you probably can improve if you're trying to be a little bit better as a service provider, as an audio engineer, or if you want to have better delivery of your files of something that you're trying to make into a studio. One last tip, because this is already a dense video, is I always name region, then track, and then add take 1, take 2, take 3. And from whatever Reaper is taking this information, remember using the wildcards, adding region, space, project information, track. So it's going to be called song 1, lead vocal, take 1, right? Take 2, take 3, blah, 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 because track is being replaced by all of those. For me, it's really important to add the name of the song, because once you're doing your 5th song and you're trying to handle a little bit better all of your files that you've been accumulating over the years, you will have a ton of files that will be named in your computer only guitar, vocals, snare, kick. And that's horrible when you're trying to rush and solve something because you're missing a file. You will never find it. Another way of being very gentle with the delivery so it's easier to look inside another DAW is to name the track first, because that's the first thing that people will see in the session. And that way, if the file is named La Huasteca Potosina, right? And I have my track control panel looking like this, and I only have these 2 tracks, you tell me which one is easier to read. If you have La Huasteca Potosina, lead vocal, La Huasteca Potosina, kick, La Huasteca Potosina, snare. And like, that's going to take forever to read because this name is super long. Maybe you want your files to be named lead vocal, the track name, and then the region name. When you're organizing inside of your finder of your files, it's going to be harder to group all of them together, right-click new folder with selection. It's going to take maybe a couple more clicks. So, like, just figure out what you think or feels faster for you. Here, I think it's more of a personal feeling. I don't think there's a very specific solving all situation. As I told you at the beginning of the year, I will be teaching you a ton of small details that I've seen people fail, and I have failed myself in different productions and sessions across years of working or trying to make it in this industry. If you like this kind of videos and want to support my work, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description, and I will keep on addressing small details like this of suggestions for recording, suggestions for mic placements, even like how to really separate all of the stages so you can never miss any detail and you're always aware of what you're trying to do and maybe if that is even what you really want to do. And at the beginning of the video, I told you that apparently I cannot talk about anything that's not always track template, right? So whenever you figure out what you want to do, like which workflow you really want to try and commit for 2 projects, the beautiful thing, as usual, is that you can have all of this saved as a right-click track template. Take advantage of your folders, please. I'll go into recording, and I will have my songwriting track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4, track 5, and it doesn't matter if I go into a new session. Whenever I load it, it's routed on its own, but it's not routed all the way down to my buses. So if you only want to save that package of tracks, it works. If you want to save everything including the buses, you can save this as a project template, or you can select all of your tracks and save it as songwriting template. Open a new session, insert from template, recording, songwriting template, and everything is routed and grouped, right? It's as easy as that. And I hope this small image helps you out with all of the ideas that I just tried to share with you. If you like this kind of videos, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, and all of those things that people on YouTube say. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and thanks for listening.